各位观众，大家好，欢迎收看华尔街电视，我是节目主持人孙昌国。今天特别为各位观众邀请到了以色列特拉维夫大学荣誉教授 Aron Shai， 为我们讨论以色列在中美角力下会做出什么抉择，决策形成背后考量的重点是什么。
That some strategists were saying, that within half a year or within a year, Iran will have this capability, but at the moment they do not. But they advance very nicely. And as you said, the relations between Iran and China are really almost perfect. I mean, there are common interests, and they have signed this treaty.
Mutually beneficial.
And it's very comprehensive. We don't know all the details, but sorry? Yes.
It's mutually beneficial. The relationship is quite mutually beneficial because China needs a lot of resources, needs the oil, natural gases, and Iran can provide it. And China has the ability to help Iran in infrastructure and also in commodity goods. So the relationship, to me, it seems quite natural. They are very mutually beneficial.
Exactly. And then again, China, look, Israel is hardly 9 million people. It's a very tiny country. It's a minute portion of a certain region here or there in China. But and China has its own interests. I mean, and Iran is a very important country, both as exporter of oil, as you said, but also as importer of Chinese goods. So there is a problem here. It's very difficult to settle this. But if we come to the original point, the point is that the more the Chinese invest in Israel, but I'm talking about national infrastructural projects, then there are some anxieties here. Should China face a certain dilemma? This is really the point I would mark.
Yes, it's understandable. Yes, Professor, you're correct. But it's an open, you just mentioned the nuclear weapon. And it seems to me it's an open secret that Israel owns the nuclear weapon. It's an open secret. So why Israel are so worried about Iran having a nuclear weapon? And because the U.S. definitely will protect Israel.
Yeah, I see. First of all, as far as the nuclear capability, I don't think we have atomic bombs, but we may, according to foreign sources, I don't know, because it's not something which is open to the public here. I mean, we know that we are very advanced, but we have no idea whatsoever. I mean, the regular citizen, the one who is not within the very limited circle of decision makers, we don't know anything, and we don't know what they know. But if we assume that, in fact, Israel has, in the future, God knows when, nuclear capability, it doesn't solve the problem. Because, you see, we are talking about the first strike and the second strike. Even if we don't talk about nuclear capability, Iran and also Hezbollah, which is in Lebanon, which is a proxy of Iran, they have their proxies in Lebanon and in Syria. And in Lebanon, Hezbollah has got a capability of, according to what I heard, but again, I don't know the numbers, but we're talking about tens and tens of missiles, which can they send to Israel and try to destroy airports, ports, hospitals, and what have you. So it doesn't really matter whether it will be nuclear or conventional. Israel is very small. And also the Iranians apparently have a long-range missiles capability. And the fear here is that when we talk about the first strike, and again, whether it is conventional or nuclear, a lot of damage can be created because we are not China or the United States or Russia or Canada, where we have the space and the luxury, shall we say, to actually, try to hide ourselves or find alternative airports, alternative places of shelter, etc. It's a very tiny country. Then there are people who speculate that should Israel be attacked, then Israel has got the second strike capability. But I, for one, do not understand, because the second strike capability, even if it's very successful, we are talking about a very great, in space, big country as Iran. So let's say you can create a certain damage there. And I'm not talking about nuclear one, but even theoretically, even nuclear one. So what? Because if Israel is destroyed, if we take the worst scenario, what would it happen if, let's say, from somewhere in the globe, Israel would be able to attack Tehran or any other city in Iran? So this is why one of the major issues in Israel, is really Iran, much more so than the Arab world or even the Palestinian, which is a very serious problem as well.
Professor, is it possible that since China is very friendly towards Israel, and also China has a very good relationship with Iran, can Israel consider about that China intervene or meddle between Israel and Iran?
No, between Israel and Iran, it's impossible. I don't think it's possible. Because as I said earlier on, we are not talking about any possibility of compromise.
But because U.S. doesn't have that close relationship with Iran, and it seems to me that Iran also regard U.S. as the enemy number one. So there are no channels. But now you have China. You have diplomatic channels with China, and also China has diplomatic channels with Iran. So why you cannot consider to use China as a negotiator or to negotiate or to pass some words towards each other?
Yeah, I see your logic, but I'm not very optimistic this is possible. It's true what you said. Beijing has a certain leverage over Tehran, something that the US hasn't got. That's true. However, we have to consider some points here. One is that even if China has a certain leverage over Iran, whether it would be ready in a crucial moment to actually use it, and whether it is able to use it. Because if we take North Korea, for example, China also has a certain leverage over North Korea, but it doesn't really tame North Korea. It doesn't bring Korea into the community of nations, and we know the story very well. In the case of Iran, it can be very similar. The Chinese can exert a certain pressure on Iran. But when it comes to the very crux of the matter, in other words, let's say when Iran says to Beijing, it's all right, you can exert whatever pressure you want, but we do not want Israel to exist. So then what? You see, when you have as I said earlier on, when you have a position or a situation where is there certain disagreement over territory, over a certain minority, over a question of your finances or trade or whatever, even if it seems unsolvable, it is possible to think or to at least fantasize that a certain solution can be created. But when you talk about the situation of the existence or not existence, and if one follows what Iran is saying, I don't think that Beijing has any leverage here. But you are right that theoretically speaking, but we don't see the Chinese, for example, getting involved even in the Palestinian-Israeli situation, and they keep aloof. They do not want to get involved. And on the other hand, they have this two-pronged situation, which I described earlier on, when in fact they go with the Arabs as far as the political and diplomatic and rhetorics is concerned, and everything. It doesn't matter what the Arab nations or Arab representatives at the UN would raise, China automatically votes for it. And I mean, and then you can simply follow the record. On the other hand, they want Israel, China wants Israel to exist. They appreciate the Jews very much. They appreciate what Israel has been doing. And they send numerous delegations here. As I said, I mean, now we have had the corona, but sometimes really the Chinese inundate Israel and they bring engineers and medical researchers, technology, nanotechnology, agriculture, what have you, everything that the world actually, and in the past, even military, not now, but in the past. They do not get from the Arab countries much, you see, even almost nothing. What they can get from the Arab or Muslim countries, they can get the support of various nations, because you have 22 Arab countries and you have 50 or whatever and Muslim countries. So the Chinese are doing a very interesting and calculating account of this thing. And this is the best as far as China, Beijing is concerned. They are very clever and they use the situation. The status quo is the best. And I think that in the future, look what happened in Syria, for example. Assad destroyed his own country. I mean, it's really 2 million people were killed, millions escaped to Turkey or whatever. We have never heard of any leader who actually destroyed in his own hands his own country. However, the Chinese consistently supported Assad no matter, and he bombarded his own people, his own cities, you see. And you cannot find any situation where the Chinese say, stop it, or whatever. On the contrary.
I think it's related to a very dynamic, very difficult situation, because it involves at least 3 parties, like US, Russia, and China. So sometimes in the geopolitical issue, China will definitely side with Russia.
Yes, you are right. But I want to direct my remarks here towards a possible reconstruction of Syria. Let's say in 5 years' time or whenever, I don't know. The only people, the only country in the world who can help there and who can actually benefit from that is China. So I see a situation where China actually helps reconstructing destroyed Syria. And so they have a certain stake there, even for the future.
Professor, let's back to the economic aspects. China signed a comprehensive innovation partnership treaty with Israel. Is there any significant progress under the treaty?
yes, I think this is a very important treaty. And again, as I said, the Chinese were very much interested in that because they are doing very well as far as innovation in the past years. And we see it in the last, experiments which they had with missiles and the space, etc. However, they know that here in Israel, it's a sort of a lab. They can get a lot from it. And this is why, and we think that we can get some advantages having this treaty with China. However, as I said, because of COVID-19 and because of a certain relaxation, I would not say crisis, there is no crisis, but a certain relaxation when we talk about Chinese-Israeli connection, I think that here we also advance a little bit slower than we look at the very simplest thing is that no one can enter China and very few, almost no one can leave China. And also we have had the same problem here. So this makes it very, very, very difficult to go, fully into this materialization of the treaty. But the treaty exists, and it's a very good sign. And I hope that in the future, we shall see it advancing as well.
All right. Professor, the Trump administration pushed normalization and peace agreements between Arab states and Israel, known as the Abraham Accords, wishing to link Gulf capital, Israeli technology, global markets, and Arab labor together. The first three aspects were largely achieved by the Accords, while the fourth pillar remains unsolved. What's your opinion?
I'm not very clear. Yes, I understand your question, and you are right. I mean, the Arab Accords are really historic accords. They change the atmosphere in the Middle East, and we see more and more Muslim countries that are interested in creating a certain contact with Israel. And this is a breakthrough. This is a breakthrough. There is no question about it. A few years ago, one could not even dream of such a situation. We have Morocco, and we have, of course, the Gulf states, etc. And we hear here and there, we hear about rumors that more and more, North African and other Muslim countries are interested to have good relations with Israel. So you are right. As far as capital is concerned, no problem. As far as technology is a problem, issue, there is again no problem. And certainly when we talk about markets, because we can export there, we can get some assistance as far as capital, etc. I am not so sure I understand what you meant by the fourth element, and this is Arab labor. Are you talking about Palestinian labor?
Yes, Palestinian labor.
Yes, the Palestinian labor issue is a very serious problem because we need, here in Israel, we need workers, we need laborers who can help, the Israeli economy emerge and further develop. There is no question about it. Now, in Europe, let's say in Germany, they consistently bring, let's say, Turkish labor from Turkey or from wherever. Now, theoretically speaking, Israel is in an ideal position because it has about 2 million and over. I'm not talking about the Arab Israelis. I'm talking about the Palestinians in the territories, in Gaza, in the West Bank. So we can actually use and enjoy a lot of Arab labor from there. and we still bring Romanians, Chinese, Turks, etc., etc. Why? Because there is the
What about Jordanians?
and some Jordanians there is no problem. You find because there is a peace existing between Israel and Jordan, and we see Jordanian men mainly working in the tourist industry in Eilat, in the southern port. I don't think there is a problem there. But what I want to emphasize is the security problem when we talk about laborers coming from Gaza or from the West Bank, you see. Because in such a case, what we see is that one promile, perhaps, or, here and there, you have terrorists actually penetrating through these sort of borders or the walls which exist. And then in Israel, there is a certain anxiety. Can we or can't we actually allow, streams of laborers coming in? Because we have to go through a certain security checks. And this limits this very possibility of Arab laborers.
It's a tragedy, Professor. I know that there are so much concern about security from the relationship with China, from your relationship with Iran, even the workers, the security issue unfortunately involved in this matter. Again, thank you so much, Professor, to have you here. It's an honor to talk to you, and I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you in the near future. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and I hope to hear from you, and maybe I'll hear this interview somewhere, or maybe you will send it to me.
Definitely.
Okay.
谢谢各位观众的收看，我们下次再会。
Thank you.